Have you ever looked back at your life at 50 and wondered, is this the ending, or just a pause between chapters? Maybe you don't need to start over, you just need to rewrite the first sentence of your next chapter. The pause that changes everything. Imagine standing in the familiar room of your own life. Everything seems fine, but deep inside, it feels like the sound has been turned off. No more rush, no more spark, just silence, and you quietly ask yourself, is this it? The truth is, that pause at 50 plus isn't the end, it's the most important comma in your entire story. According to the Harvard Adult Development Study, one of the longest running studies on human happiness, people who learn to pause and reflect in midlife are far more likely to enter the happiest and most creative phase of their lives. They stop chasing money or approval, and begin editing their own story with awareness and honesty. Think of a piece of music. Without rests, it's just noise. Your life works the same way. The moment you pause and listen is the moment you finally hear your real melody. Maybe you were once the worried father, the resilient mother, the tireless worker, but those were just chapters. The new one, the one you write not out of duty, but out of joy, begins only when you allow yourself to stop and ask, who am I when I no longer have to please anyone? Your brain, ironically, is wired to fear emptiness. When there's no goal, it sounds the alarm, something's wrong. But neuroscience shows that in silence, the brain's default mode network, the part responsible for creativity, becomes most active. It reorganizes memories, connects dots between past and present, and starts building new meaning, like an editor quietly rearranging your life's novel behind the scenes. So if you're 50, 60, or 70 and feeling empty, understand this, it's not the end. It's your halftime signal, time to breathe, to reset, to realize there's still more story left to tell, because when a writer pauses, it's never because the story is over, it's because the best part is about to begin. The myth of being too late. There's a very convincing lie society has whispered into your ear for years: if you haven't done something great by 50, it's over. And so, you believe it as if life were a train that already left the station without you. But here's the truth: there is no last train in life. The tracks never end, only people stop walking. Psychologists call this the closing window illusion, the belief that opportunities vanish with age. In reality, your brain continues to learn, adapt, and form new neural connections right until the end of life. A study from the University of California, Irvine, proved that adults over 60 can still create new synaptic connections, those tiny bridges that allow you to learn new skills, new languages, and even rediscover joy. Look around. Colonel Sanders started KFC at 65. Laura Ingalls Wilder published her first Little House on the Prairie book at 64. And Anna Mary Robertson, better known as Grandma Moses, began painting in her 70s. None of them started over. They simply rewrote the way they told their story. The scary part isn't getting older, it's living by an outdated script. If you keep repeating, "I'm too old for this," that's not a biological fact. It's a limiting belief installed by the world around you. And here's the twist: your brain believes whatever story you feed it. Neuroscientists call it the self-fulfilling prophecy effect. When you say "I'm too late," your brain releases less dopamine, the chemical that fuels motivation. But when you shift the script to "I'm just entering a new season," your nervous system lights up differently. Like an old tree, you may not grow taller, but your roots go deeper, and your late blooms often smell the sweetest. So, if someone tells you you're too late, smile and remember, no chapter is too late, only the writer can refuse to turn the page. The science of second chances. If you think your brain is too old to change, get ready to be surprised. Modern science shows that even at 60, 70, or 80, the human brain still has an incredible ability to rewire, learn, and adapt. This phenomenon is called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to literally rewrite itself. A well-known study from University College London found that just 30 minutes of learning a new skill every day, painting, music, journaling, can spark thousands of new neural connections. And here's the best part: the brain doesn't distinguish between success and trying again. It only knows that you're learning. So even when you're starting over, your brain sees progress. In fact, older adults often learn better than younger ones, because they have one powerful advantage: experience. You already know what failure looks like, so you're no longer afraid of it. You understand your emotions, so you're more patient. That's the hidden superpower of aging: emotional regulation. And when your emotions are stable, your brain learns faster, stronger, and deeper. Another study from the Yale School of Public Health found that people with a positive attitude toward aging live an average of 7.5 years longer than those with a negative outlook. Not because of genetics, but because they think differently. When you believe you still have a second chance, your body responds, your heart beats steadier, cortisol drops, and your brain's motivation center, ventral striatum, lights up. Second chances aren't miracles, they're real biological processes. Every time you try again, your brain records, we're still alive. Still learning. Still writing. A second chance isn't about going back in time, it's about using your time more meaningfully. And if you're still breathing, you still have a chance. That's it. Simple as that. The weight of old chapters. Sometimes, it's not age that exhausts you, it's the library of old chapters you keep carrying on your back, of the memories you never forgave yourself for, the choices you regret, the dreams that never quite made it, all piled up, pressing down on every step you take. And then you call that feeling lost motivation. But really, you're just overloaded with unresolved emotions. In psychology, this is known as emotional residue, the leftover emotional dust from past experiences. It's like fine dust in your lungs, invisible, but it makes it harder to breathe. A study from Stanford University found that when people constantly replay failures or guilt, the brain's emotional center, the amygdala, becomes hyperactive, while the motivation center, the prefrontal cortex, weakens. In other words, the past hijacks the present. But here's the beautiful part: you don't need to erase the past, you just need to retell it differently. As someone who lost their job at 55 could say, I got fired. I failed. But they could also say, I was given a chance to start again, to see who I am beyond my job. Same event. Two stories. Two completely different lives. The human brain reacts to language the same way it reacts to reality. When you change the story, your brain rewires the memory. Science calls this reframing, a technique used in modern psychotherapy to help people break free from negative loops. If you want to live lighter, try rewriting your old memories as a kinder storyteller. Not to hide the pain, but to accept it. Imagine rereading a painful chapter in your own life's novel and saying, yeah, that hurt. But it also taught me exactly what I needed to live the rest of my story. Sometimes, freedom doesn't mean dropping the luggage. Freedom means learning how to carry it differently. Rewriting without erasing. One of the biggest mistakes people make when they say, I want to start over, is believing they must erase their past. But in truth, you don't need to begin again on a blank page, you only need to keep writing on the one that's already open. Psychologists call this self-narrative editing, rewriting your personal story. A study from the University of Southern California found that when people reinterpret their memories through a wiser lens, both the emotional and rational centers of the brain, hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, become active, helping them feel more at peace with themselves. In other words, you don't need to forget, you just need to tell your story in a different light. Imagine reading your own memoir. The first pages might be messy, full of mistakes, crossouts, and tear stains, but instead of tearing it up, you take a new pen and write in the margin, I lived. I learned. And I'm still here. That's the art of rewriting without erasing. There's a truth few people talk about. Those who've been deeply hurt often feel life the deepest, because they've known the dark. They understand the worth of light. Positive psychology calls this post-traumatic growth after pain. A study from the University of North Carolina shows that people who've survived major crises often become more compassionate, grateful, and creative afterward. You don't need to hide your cracks, you can let the light pass through them, just like Japan's kintsugi art, where broken pottery is repaired with gold, making the cracks the most beautiful part. You're the same. Your story doesn't need to be perfect, it only needs to be true, because in the end, what moves people isn't a flawless life, but the courage to smile again after being broken. The power of small, quiet steps. Here's something no one tells you after 50. Progress doesn't look heroic anymore. It's not climbing mountains or chasing dreams with fire in your eyes. Sometimes it's just getting out of bed when you'd rather stay under the covers. Sometimes it's choosing to smile at the cashier even when your heart feels heavy. Science backs this up. Small, consistent actions create long-term change far more effectively than big, dramatic bursts of motivation. Psychologists call this the compound effect. Each tiny act of courage rewires your brain's reward system, strengthening your resilience. So when you walk for 10 minutes, journal your thoughts, or make that overdue phone call, your brain says, see? You're still moving. At this stage in life, it's not about speed, it's about momentum. You don't need to sprint. You just need to keep showing up, one breath, one choice, one day at a time. That's how new stories are written, not with grand gestures, but with quiet, daily edits. So if you think your life is standing still, look again. Maybe it's just moving in smaller, steadier steps than before, and that's perfectly enough. The myth of too late. Let's be honest, society loves to whisper in your ear that if you haven't made it by 30, you've missed the train. But here's the truth. There is no deadline for becoming who you are. Colonel Sanders started KFC at 65. Laura Ingalls Wilder published her first book at 64. Grandma Moses began painting at 78. They didn't start over. They just kept going differently. Psychologists call this the second growth curve, a stage in mid to late life when people shift from chasing success to seeking meaning. It's not regression. It's evolution. Your values change. Your desires soften, but your depth expands. So, when someone says, it's too late, smile gently, because they don't understand that you're not racing, you're refining. Your story isn't slowing down, it's finally getting good. Maybe the first half of your life was about building careers, families, reputations. This half, it's about becoming peaceful, wise, and free enough to live on your own terms. You're not too late. You're right on time for the life that was waiting for you to notice it. Writing the first line of your next chapter. So, where do you begin? Not with a grand plan. Not with a 10-step list, just with a sentence, the first line of your next chapter. Ask yourself, what would I write if I stopped trying to impress anyone, even myself? Because rewriting your life doesn't start with what you do, it starts with what you believe about who you still are. Maybe your new chapter begins with, I finally stopped apologizing for changing. Or, I chose peace over perfection. Or even, I don't need to be who I was, I just need to be real. Here's the secret, your brain doesn't care how old you are. Neuroscience confirms, it keeps growing, adapting, creating until your last breath. Every time you decide to do something new, learn a language, pick up painting, forgive someone, take a walk in the rain, you're literally rewriting your brain's map of life. So, write your sentence. Whisper it, even if your voice shakes, because one line today becomes a paragraph tomorrow, and before you know it, you've written a whole new life, one that finally feels like you.